So you want a basic crash course into hoodoo. All right. First thing you got to know is that you got to be a black descendant of American slaves. Now, when I say that, I mean you can't just be somebody who's an immigrant. I don't want to be exclusive, but that's the rules. That's been the rules for centuries. I didn't make that rule. It just is what it is. With that being said, you have certain terms. Men in hoodoo and conjure work, in root work, we're usually called root workers or root doctors. That's generally what the men are referred to. But women, they're called conjure women. You have various women who have held that title, like, for example, Patsy Moses, the Texas conjure woman, Aunt Sally, the conjure woman. You have even Harriet Tubman was considered a conjure woman. So hoodoo in its basic principle can be practiced alongside with Christianity. In fact, you have a lot of people who are black descendants of American slaves who live in the American South who happen to practice hoodoo, but also show up to church every Sunday. In fact, a lot of times when you look at people who are older, matriarchs of a church or a family, they're called mother. And a lot of times that term mother has links to hoodoo. Now, that being said, that's not the reason why you're watching this video. You want to learn more about how to get started. First things first, you have to learn more about yourself and your lineage. A lot of times that will give you a hint in towards what your specialty is. Some people have a specialty in terms of doing several things in hoodoo, but some people specialize in certain things based on what your ancestors were particularly good at. For me, you notice how in the last video that you asked this question on, I said, hey, the roots are talking to me. So in magic and then also witchcraft, Wicca, the occult, you have several abilities. You have things like clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is when you can see the future, or you can get glimpses or visions. And in many black descendants of American slave households and in many FBA households, you will hear terms like someone has the gift. Well, that's what that means. They're clairvoyant, but their clairvoyance has a root in root work and also hoodoo and also ancestral beliefs and also ancestral power. So see, magic is magic across the board, no matter what culture you go to. It's the source of the magic that we're talking about here, the source. This is why it is such an exclusive practice to us. The source of our magic is our ancestral strength. Is what our ancestors been through and how they overcame to lead us to here. I would not exist if it were not for my ancestors who slaved and toiled to get me here, to drag my behind here. Okay, I wouldn't exist without them. So when the more respect and honor and veneration you give towards the ancestors, the more powerful you become as a hoodoo magic user or a hoodoo root worker or a hoodoo conjure woman or a whatever you want to call it. The more you give respect to who you are and where you came from and your ancestors, the more powerful you become. This is why unresolved issues with your mother or your father, you have to resolve that in order to be a better root worker and a better conjure worker. So, but back to what I was saying about special abilities. Some people have clairvoyance. They can see visions of, visions and stuff. And oftentimes you will find that amongst people who practice hoodoo, the gift. Whereas with mine, it's more clairaudience. Clairaudience is when you can hear things from the roots, like I said, or sometimes spirits that have long passed, ancestors who are sending you signals. Or you could have a special gift whereas you can just create things. You're very, very creative. Or some people have the gift of making music that transcends time. You look at somebody like James Brown. That is ancestral power. That music is timeless. You listen to the song, The Big Payback. That's magic. See, that's what Ryan Coogler was referring to in the movie Sinners, about how our music, how our music, if you have that gift, if that's what your ancestors have actually empowered you with, it will transcend time. There will be nothing like it. Nothing will even compare to it. That's what Ryan Coogler was trying to explain to you. So first, you got to figure out what is your specialty. What are you good at? Some people have a gift of speaking. Some people, like several black leaders. A good example of this is, you look at somebody, people in politics, or people who do motivational speaking work, or people who do a lot of black empowerment, people who speak at rallies and stuff. If you look at some of the black descendants of American slaves, we bring a different energy. And that is us channeling that energy through ancestral power. See, you are made up of everything your ancestors were. So when you go to do certain things, you will find in some cases that you almost feel possessed, like someone's trying to speak through you. So whatever your talent is, mine is clairvoyance. I mean, not clairvoyance, clairaudience. This is why I always wear the freaking earphones, because I always hear stuff. You know, so whatever your specialty is, you got to find what that is. So that will allow you to work as a root worker more effectively. For example, if you want to work with roots and you want to work with the earth, you want to work with herbs and fungi and that kind of stuff. If you have clairaudience, you can literally the fungi or the plants can literally tell you what they need. You have clairvoyance. Well, you have a better, you know, if you're clairvoyant, if you're someone like Harriet Tubman, she was also called Mama Moses. You know, see, let me just take a quick detour. You have your real name and your magical name. You know, hers was Mama Moses, but you have various people. You know, if you talk to anybody who does magical practices or spiritual practices or they're into the occult, what you'll find is that they have their real name and they have their magical name. Well, you know, sometimes that denotes what you do best. Like, for example, you know, with Harriet Tubman, hers was Mama Moses because she was leading her people out of the Egypt land, you know, in a metaphorical sense. You know, so with that being said, you know, when you find out what you do best, that's when you start. That's when you start. If you're really, really good at researching, and if you could find things in a way that others can't, if you could create things, if your gift is music, that's where you start. You have to find your medium. Find what you can use to channel your ancestors. Right? That's how you start. That's why that was the theme of the whole video. Find your medium. How do you get in contact with your ancestral lineage? Mine is through clairaudience, but yours could be through music. Yours could be through drawing. I've met FBAs who have said, man, when I start drawing, it's like my hand and my fingers are possessed by somebody else. Somebody else is doing the drawing for me. Because that skill, that ability doesn't just come out of nowhere. Somebody in your lineage had that skill. And sometimes they'll want to speak through you, through that skill, through that ability. So find whatever it is that is your medium. And that's how you start. For me, I can't do root work unless I have my clairaudience. If I can't hear the root speak, it's pointless. So the best starting point, and I'll make multiple videos if you keep asking questions, because I love discussing hoodoo, man. I love it. But notice how I didn't reveal too much, though. Notice how I'm being very vague. I'm thinking about what I say before I say it, because I'm giving you only stuff that you can read inside of books, things that I've read over the years that's already public. The secret stuff you figure out on your own, because it would go against all codes if I were to tell you that in a video. So the long and short of it is find your medium. And from there, that's when the fun starts. And I'll keep making responses to kind of lead you on your path, because I'm going on a journey myself.